Hey everybody, today I'm counting down my top 10 elegant board games. Now when I say elegant board games, what I mean is games with a low rules overhead in comparison to the depth of the game and the kind of weight of the decisions throughout the game. For me, elegance is one of the top traits that I look for in my board games, because I really don't like kind of, overwrought and convoluted games just for the sake of it. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the games I do like do have that element to them, but that's, as I said, one of the foremost traits that I look for, because I think the quicker you can get into a game, the better, and you don't want to be sat there for ages and ages just learning how to play it before you actually get stuck in. So I've got a big kind of variance of games here. I think I've got a good diversity, loads of different genres of games, and they're all rock solid at that. So at number 10, I have Cryptid. Now, Cryptid is actually a pretty simple game in its essence. It's a deduction game where you're trying to pinpoint somewhere on this map where this monster could be. And every single player involved has a unique rule assigned to them. And when you combine all those rules together, it's going to pinpoint one particular location. But where the elegance comes into this game is basically on your turn, you're going to ask one player one question, or by asking them if it could be on a particular hex on that board. And they're going to simply say yes or no and put a marker on it. And then in return, you have to do the same. So you either have to put if they said yes, it could be here, you also have to put one of your yes tokens on somewhere on the board where it could be according to your rule. And that's simply it. So the decision wise, it's, while it's simple in what it is, you do actually have to think about where you're going to choose carefully. And when you do actually have to do something in return by responding to their question, you can be very clever and savvy about where you put your marker to try and mislead the other players on where this cryptid could be. Extremely clever, one of the best deduction games out there for me, and the algorithm about how all those rules comes together to pinpoint someone on that map is absolutely genius. So a really great game, that is Cryptid. At number 9, I have a pretty ferocious little card game called Arboretum. Now, from the face of Arboretum, you might not think, this doesn't look fierce, it doesn't look cutthroat, but I assure you it is. So this game is based on making your own tableau of cards, or Arboretum. And on your turn, you're going to simply have you're going to have a hand of 7 cards, and every turn you're going to draw 2 cards. You're going to play one of them into your Arboretum, and you're going to discard the other one onto your discard pile. Now, it's important that each player has their own discard pile, and not like kind of a central discard pile where cards will never be seen again. What's important about that is because when it's other players' turns, they can either draw cards from the face down stack, or can draw cards from each player's discard pile. So you've got to be very careful about which cards you discard, because other players might want them. But the point of what you're doing is you're trying to build this, as I said, this tableau of cards by formulating these different paths for trees, trying to get points by making the longer paths. You can cross to other different tree types and stuff like that. But where the real weight of the game comes in is the management of your hand, because you've got to be very careful about what cards you discard, as I said, because other players want the cards that you're getting rid of. But what's really tricky about this game is that you've got to keep cards in your hand of a certain tree types based on the cards you have in front of you, because you're only going to score points in relation to cards you have left in your hand being higher than the other players of that tree type, because only the players with the highest amount of cards of a tree type in their hand are going to score that type. And that can be extremely tricky, because you want to get these trees down so that you're actually going to get the points in the first place. But if you don't keep anything back in your hand, you're going to score nothing. And just knowing what other players have in their hands is, it's going to be impossible to tell, but you can kind of keep a track of what they're discarding and stuff like that. But yeah, the weight of the decisions in this game is absolutely agonizing. Sometimes at the end of the game, you'll think you've done extremely well by having a huge kind of path of cards and having the high number of cards in your hand, but then somebody trumps you just by 1 and you end up scoring nothing at all. A great game, extremely clever, and elegant to a T. That is Arboretum. At number 8, I have a game by Alexander Pfister. This is Isle of Skye. Now, Isle of Skye is a tile placement game where you're trying to you're building this own kind of region in Scotland, and you're basically trying to place these tiles in order to fulfill these different kind of scoring criteria at the end of each round. But the game actual flow itself is extremely simple in this game, but again, the weight of the decisions is pretty tricky, because every turn you're going to draw 3 cards from a bag, and you're going to hide them behind a screen, and then out of those 3 tiles, you're going to choose 1 to basically get rid of, and the other 2 you're going to set prices to, based on your current bank of money. And the importance of this is fundamental, because the prices you're setting is what you're basically saying that, I'm willing to part with this tile if another player pays me this amount of money. But then again, if nobody chooses to buy those tiles off you, you have to pay that cost yourself. And that is absolutely genius for me, because you can try and be greedy and hope someone pays it. But if they don't pay it, you're stuck yourself. So that nuance of balancing how much each tile costs is really where the depth of the game comes in for me. You can be strategic in this game because you've got to plan ahead, because you know what the kind of future scoring rounds are gonna kind of require. Yeah, extremely clever, but again, very simple and digestible in terms of its rules overhead. And it's actually pretty easy to teach this to to kind of introductory gamers, because as I said, it's not a lot to take in, but the trick is about just putting things, or being as cost effective as possible, and balancing your funds in the best way you can. So that is Isle of Skye at number 8. At number 7, probably the most complex game to this point. In fact, it definitely is. This is Navigador by Mac Gertz. Now, this is a rondel game, so by that, what I mean is you've kind of got this wheel of different actions you can take, and every turn you can either move 1, 2, or 3 spaces around that rondel in a clockwise fashion and take the corresponding action. And that's where the elegance comes in for me. You're never overwhelmed by decisions, because you can only ever make one of those 3 decisions. But out of those 3 decisions, it's going to be extremely difficult to choose which one, because you're going to want to do each one. The objective of the game is that you're basically trying to travel the world by not only sailing, but trying to build factories, set up colonies and stuff like this. And ultimately, the way you score is you basically pick up these privileges which can amplify your multipliers for doing a number of different things. But as I said, the real depth of this game is that there's this real tension that you want to be the first to do everything at all times. Not only do you want to be the first to get the privileges, because you want to score those multipliers, but there's only one of each type available. You want to be the first to go to the market while the market's hot and make as much money as possible. You want to buy the buildings, because the buildings get more and more expensive as the game goes on. So you want to be quicker at doing everything. It's an extremely clever game. I absolutely love it. And it just, for me, is just elegance personified, because as I said, you're never overwhelmed by so many things. Just one of 3 decisions, but each one is going to be absolutely excruciating on which one you're gonna choose. So that is Navigador, an absolutely phenomenal, elegant game. At number 6, I have Hanamaki. Now, Hanamaki is a 2-player only card game. It's a tug-of-war style game where you have, I believe it's 6 different geisha girls, or it might be 7, and you are trying to basically win their favour by having the most cards of their suit on your side of the table. But this game is very, very nuanced, very tricky, and probably one of the most delicately balanced games that I've ever played. And when you first play this game originally, the kind of strategies and nuances and depth might not be apparent to you, but the more and more you play it, the more you can kind of understand and appreciate how well this game is designed. Because basically your turn or a round of the game consists of taking 4 actions in any order you want. And once you've used that action, you can't use it again until the next round. One of those actions is to basically reserve a card from your hand until the end of the round and play it in front of you. One of them is to simply delete a card from the set, basically. And the other ones have this very clever but absolutely excruciating kind of I split you choose mechanism, where you'll pick either 3 or 4 cards and basically present them to your opponent. Your opponent will either pick a pair of them or a single card if it's the 3 one, and you'll get the remaining cards and place them on your side. The way that you can manipulate the game in the most kind of intriguing manner is absolutely fascinating with this one. And I think if anybody's played Hanamaki, they'll completely testify about how this game, has so much hidden layers to it, while still being extremely simple. That is Hanamaki, one of the best two-player games out there. At number 5, I have The Palaces of Carrara. This is a very clever Euro-style game by Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer. The objective of the game is you're trying to basically collect marble to build buildings in a number of different cities. Now, all the marble have different kind of qualities to them, and the more kind of refined the marble is, means you can build in the more expensive cities and get better rewards. But the game is boiled down into 3 very simple actions. First action is to simply buy marble by paying the cost associated on this really cool, basically resource wheel, where you can either pay the costs that they are, or you can rotate the wheel, making each brick cheaper as it rotates around. But obviously, if you do so, you're making it cheaper for your opponents as well. The second action you can do is to buy a building and associate it by cashing in the marble type and then putting it on your player board. And the third action is to score a city. And when you score a city, you're going to score multipliers based on the buildings in them. They can be points or money, but the trick is that it has this real kind of chicken mechanism to it, where when you score a city, your opponent can no longer score that city. So not only do you want to make powerful cities, you've got to be careful because your opponent could score it before you, completely shutting you out of doing so. A really cool game. Very clean, very simple, and just elegant. That is The Palaces of Carrara. At number 4, I have the second game by Wolfgang Kramer. This is El Grande. Now, if you're a fan of my channel, El Grande is currently my number 1 board game of all time. I love this game. It is a game that dates back to the mid-90s, so it's quite old. But for me, it is just absolutely phenomenal. It's an area control game where the objective is very simple: score as many points as you can by controlling regions, by having the most kind of cubes or meeples in them, depending on which version you have. And the way you put those cubes in or meeples in is by the use of these action cards. These action cards are going to let you kind of manipulate the board state by moving cubes around and stuff. But they're also going to determine how many workers you can place on the board as well. And there's a really cool central mechanism as well, where you can only place meeples on the board corresponding to where the king is, which is this huge kind of pawn, and you can only place them in kind of adjacent regions to the king. And the way you get the action cards that you want is by bidding on them, by playing these power cards. And basically, the higher the power card you play, the first dibs you're going to get on the action cards. But you can't always play the higher cards because, not only because can you only play them once, so you've got to be careful about when and where you're going to use them. But also you want to play the lower cards, because if you only play higher cards, you're not going to have a kind of income of meeples to keep placing onto the board. This is a game that's so simple. It's tactical, strategic, it's got everything you want, it's constantly engaging, the board is constantly shifting, but the rules overhead is very easy to digest, and it is an absolute classic game, and just a testament to the genius of Wolfgang Kramer. At number 3, I have Ra by Rainer Knizia. Now, Ra is an auction-style game. I think it's probably his most famous auction-style game. And again, this game, I think it dates back to the 90s as well. The idea of the game is basically to collect different sets of kind of artifacts or Egyptian things, and they all score in different manners. But the nuances of this game are so genius. And you basically have a bunch of these bidding tokens, and on a player's turn, you're either going to draw a tile from the bag and kind of place them on the lot that's going to be bid for this turn. Or you can basically call Ra and basically start the auction for that round. And sometimes you might be forced to do so by drawing a Ra token. But because you know what everybody has to bid, you've got to be very careful about when to call what Ra, because you could simply say I had a 3 to bid and my opponent's lowest one is a 5 to bid. I've got to kind of get the most mileage I can out of those, out of the tiles I have. But at the same time, I've got to be careful not to push too far, because sometimes You know, I could end up getting nothing from my tokens, because if you draw a certain amount of raw tokens, the round is going to end instantaneously, and you're not going to get anything at all. So this is a very clever game. Again, one of these games that I think the depth might not be as apparent initially, but the more and more you play it, it's going to reveal itself. And for me, the best player always wins raw. It is just so well balanced and just very clever. And definitely one of the kind of pillars of what's made Reiner Knizia the designer, or the kind of renowned designer that he is today. At number 2, I have another classic game with Puerto Rico. Now, Puerto Rico was ranked the best board game in the world for many, many years, and I can definitely see why, because of the depth and rules correspondence to that depth. It is a game about colonization. You are trying to basically get or produce these different resources in order to ship them off for points. The game uses one of my favorite mechanisms in board games, which is kind of this role selection mechanism, where you have a bunch of these role tokens or tiles, and all you're going to do on your turn is you're going to pick one of those tiles, and then you're going to get to do it, but everybody else is going to get to do it as well. But the person whose turn it is gets a slightly improved version of that, and they might be kind of to buy these buildings, but you get a discount if you're the one to choose it, or if you're selling, you might get like an extra bonus to do so. But the depth of this game is a real different feel to a lot of other games, because you've got to be very aware about the state of every other player involved in the game, because when you choose certain actions, you've got to be not only wary about how much you're going to benefit yourself, but how much you're going to benefit other players. And it's always that kind of discrepancy or gap in between how much you're going to benefit yourself and other players, which is going to win you the game. You've got to be aware that you're advantaging yourself more than you are the other players at all times. And if you play this game in the wrong way, you're going to absolutely shoot yourself in the foot. But I love the simplicity of those different actions. Some of them are just to take money, some of them, as I said, to buy buildings, some of them are to load your ships, some of them are to produce goods, some of them are to buy new kind of plantations in order to produce more goods. But as I said, the board state is everything in this game. The player interaction is just injected into this game that many other games just can't kind of compare with, because it is fundamental on everything you do in this one. It is a classic. It is so well renowned, and so rightly so. It holds up great to this day, and it's just an amazing, elegant example of board game designing. And finally, at number 1, I have the second game by Mac Gertz, first being Navigador. This one is Concordia. Now, for me, when I think of elegance in board gaming, Concordia is the first game that springs to my mind. It is just the most amazingly streamlined game with the most depth that I've ever played in my life. The premise of the game is that you're basically trying to travel around all these different regions of the world, trying to set up trade houses, and buy cards to score multipliers at the end of the game based on how many trade houses you're in, or the different regions you're in, all the different kind of goods you're producing. But the system of the game is so simple, because everybody's going to start with an identical set of cards, and you're going to play one of these cards and do what it says on them. Some of them might be traveling around, some of them might be to reap resources, some of them might be to buy new cards into your hand, which obviously give you new abilities to do, but they also give you the cards aren't only important for what they do, but they're also important for the way you score at the end of the game, because they're going to amplify your multipliers based on the god type they're assigned to. So say, for example, I think the Saturn cards, you're going to score a point for each region you're in times the amount of Saturn cards you have. And the weight of the decision is so important there, because not only do you want the abilities themselves, but you also want those endgame multipliers as well. So streamlined, and just agonizing decisions throughout, because you want to be the first to do everything, like you are in Navigador. You want to be the first to buy those cards when they come out. You want to get the first into the cities, because if you don't get in the cities first, you're going to have to pay more money to get in them, and that can really ramp up. This game is a masterpiece. It is one of the most elegant designs out there. It is streamlined, it is deep as anything, and there's so many things to explore. And yeah, I cannot fault this game in terms of its design. It is just an absolutely incredible game. And I think everybody should play this one and appreciate how well it's been put together. So I hope you've enjoyed this top 10 list of my favourite elegant games. There are more that I could have put on this list, and it was quite hard to narrow it down. But as I said, it's a real trait that I look for. And I just really do appreciate it when designers are so, intelligent to not only make a great game, but to make it easy to play as well. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the review. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos too. You can also support me by following me on Instagram or backing me on Patreon. I'll put the links below for those. But for everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.